Today, we have two guests on the program, Sarah Kyle and Kelly Strandberg. Both are principals at the LE3 Solutions and have rich histories in the senior living space. So I can't wait to talk to them about their thoughts on the communal living and how the pandemic impacted their roles. So Sarah and Kelly, thank you so much for being on Boomer Living today. So how are you?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Great. Could we start by having you share some background information, like where you're from and where does your expertise lie and how did you get interested in this field? So maybe Sarah, could you share with us?
Sure. So, Sarah Kyle, I am actually in Orlando, Florida right now, and probably been in this senior living space as we know it for the last 13 years. But my interest started during college, doing some internships. I started doing cardiac rehab and just stayed with that. Thought I was going to be a professor for a while and then realized that I much more liked being on the programming side with older adults. And it segued over different organizations, different operators, and actually was career change halt, if you will, during COVID. And so stepped out and started my own consulting business as a result of that layoff.
Good for you. I think it's a great time to reboot or restart a new adventure. So that's awesome. So how about you, Kelly?
I've also been in the senior living space for about 13 years. My entry into working with an aging population happened while lifeguarding a senior splash water aerobics program. And it really made me realize no matter our age, we are all the same. We still have friendships and connections, and we're vibrant, and we share humor, and we share grief. And getting to know the individuals in that program really just catapulted me into a very different direction professionally. And it's why I went back to graduate school and really found myself working primarily with chronic conditions and chronic diseases. And then I entered into the senior living space using that background. And here we are today, partnered up and really focusing on resident engagement and resident well-being.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time to be here. And resident engagement, there's nothing, more important than that right now. So thank you. What do you think some of the most important items to keep in mind when creating engagement programs for the residents? What's your thought on that, Sarah?
You're very good at this one.
The more and more I get into this, the more and more I realize that young or old, it's all people. And so I almost respond to that question of what is most important when you think about how you want to be engaged in life. And in order for engagement to really happen, there has to be a connection to it. In order for there to be a connection, there has to be individuality. And so it's really is doing the homework up front to know who that person is and how they want that engagement. There's group settings that work for people, but the assumption that older people, 65 plus, all like this black and white movie or all like this big band or something from a decade is pretty limiting. And it may be easier to do, but you miss that connectivity. So it all goes back to knowing an individual and finding the time to get to know them.
That's very true. I guess regardless of the age, we all need a sense of connection, engagement. It varies from individuals, but making that bond or a sense of belongingness, it's important, more so now than ever. So do you have any thoughts on that, Kelly?
I think to what Sarah shared, when you take the time to really get to know the individuals, you can then start to identify, are there people with similar interests and similar passions? And you can start to bring people together around those. Even during this time of the pandemic, we have figured out creative ways to connect people virtually, so maybe through Zoom calls, and even doing some physically distanced programs that people connect on. So it might be a discussion group. It might be something movement-based. We have one beautiful example of a resident in a community, and this is when COVID-19 first started. She called up her son and said, "Hey, I need you to teach me everything Zoom because I have a feeling this might go on longer than we're anticipating, and we don't want to give up our morning coffee gathering and our evening cocktail hour." And she was able to then learn how to use that and teach a lot of her friends and peers and neighbors in the community so that they could continue that because that connection was so critical to them. We have another example that we learned from an industry colleague where a gentleman, when we started to see things level out back over the summer, late summer, he went to the mail room and he saw a neighbor and he couldn't recall that neighbor's name. And that really bothered him because he hadn't seen this person in months. And he said, no more. I'm going to be proactive. And they figured out how to have a virtual men's dinner group. And so I think finding creative ways to connect people, whether it's common interests or bonds or just wanting to be with one another is critical. And then how do you layer in the appropriate solution, making sure we keep people safe at the same time?
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, safety, right? Then engagement. And it's a fine balance. I know there's creative ways, and I sure hope that as we move into the new year with the vaccines rolling out, that we truly go back to socialization. So it's a process. It'll take some time, but I'm hopeful. So how do you curate? And I know you touch on this, you cited some examples. So how do you curate activities for the programs that appeal to residents with a wide variety of backgrounds and interests and abilities? Do you have some kind of a systematic way? Because your audience, it's a wide gamut of folks.
That's a great question. I think that is the hardest one and the most daunting one is how do you take the time? Most importantly is there has to be some type of repository. What we find is because it is so relationship based with staff, that so much of this information lies in the heads of the staff members. And people do not think about their exit. But what we know happens is when one person exits that had all that information, it's lost. So all these rich stories and how to go about engaging people gets lost. It's one thing to write it down. Writing it down on paper is better than nothing. But realistically, we're not going back and reviewing paper notes in communities. So that is where technology really does come into play to drive this efficiency, that you have to look at ways to capture that story and then use that story in daily operations. There's so many different ways to do it. Once you start to get that, what I call the foundation of who is in your community, then you start to look at those interests. So there's some really cool stuff about music right now. The idea is that we just turn on music overhead. But what if you had a way to know the top 50 songs of people in your community? And that was the overhead music that played. Looking at ways to collect that information and then I think catapult it into the daily operations, whether that's dining or excursions or outings, is so important because it doesn't just become this calendar and here's your activity time when you're not doing something else. It all blends together.
Absolutely. So now, what are your thoughts on how the pandemic has elevated the value of resident engagement and the criticalness of connecting with family and friends?
I think we have all experienced this personally, and even more so in communal living settings. We always knew how critical it was, and that one of the benefits of being in a senior living housing setting was the social aspect. But we didn't really, I don't think we could have ever truly quantified it to this level until something this catastrophic had occurred. And so we are seeing just time and time again how important it is to not only figure out ways for our residents to connect with families and loved ones and friends, but also how important it is for them to connect with their neighbors and their peers within that community setting. And I think initially during the pandemic, it was, we got to keep people connected with their families. Yes, hands down, very important. But what we started to discover from the residents more than anything was when we were able to start, we had that small window of time where we did start to loosen some restrictions, that they wanted to see each other. And that was not anything we had initially anticipated. We thought people would be demanding to go off campuses and go see their loved ones that maybe are in their local communities or within a short drive. And they were like, no, we want to see each other. And to me, that speaks to the power of how important community is and how important these types of community settings really are, and how much you start to value your peers and your neighbors, and how they even become a version of your family. And so that became a much greater priority than we probably ever would have anticipated. But it was such a nice thing to unearth and discover that they needed each other as much as they needed their loved ones.
Yeah, that's true. I think in times of uncertainty, of course, first and foremost, you want to know where your family is. You want them to be near, but at the same time, you're going to need the people next door to you. God forbid something happens and they're in the same place, the same situation, in needing help if it comes up. So that's a great point. So now, do you think the pandemic has allowed the residents a greater voice in what the programs and the engagement opportunities are offered?
Absolutely. I think this pandemic you can look at it two ways. You can look at the devastating just impact from everything business-wise, operations and staffing, which is one way. But I think it has started a new conversation around the impact that this activity programming does have and how important it is. I also think that once something is always available to you, you start to become a little bit complacent and you maybe do not understand the impact that it has. I think this is the best disruption that has happened because it has allowed this engagement world to be shut off. So it has propelled for people the importance of it. I think it was something that we just took as a nice to have and everybody does it. It's caused us all to rethink the impact and how we go about doing it because it was group focused prior to this and now it is absolutely individualized. So it's a great disruption. It's unfortunate, but there's so much the industry can learn, so much we've learned in this, right? Things we did before of why. And now that we can't do them, there has to be this creative innovation without dollars as well. That is a bonus.
I would like to add one other thing to what Sarah said, that with the focus more on the individual, it's also highlighted and shown us that people are still very purposeful and able to be very autonomous in how they live their day-to-day life. And for so long as an industry, when we think about engagement, there's always been that group program calendar of activities. And what we've really unearthed is that a lot of people have gone back to things they're very passionate about that they let go by the wayside because we were offering and catering to so many different interests and needs. And I still have a couple residents from over the years I still stay in close contact with. I had one individual tell me, I'm writing again, I'm painting again, I'm sewing. She was telling me how she made all these special pillows for all her family members for Christmas. And so part of me feels as much as we need to make sure people aren't isolating and experiencing the negative effects due to that, but there's also some positives that have come out of it, and people are able to regain part of that creative side of who they are in passionate pursuits.
I think because of the ongoing changes, easing back, shutting down. So perhaps we all, not just the folks, the residents, maybe we're just wanting to rely on what we have control over, as opposed to waiting for this program to set out or this activity or maybe another reopening or another closure. I'm finding that to be true even with school age kids. Virtual school, at home school, a hybrid. I don't want to say the word numb, but they're not relying on what's upcoming anymore. So they adjusted to what they do have control with. That's a great idea. Folks, the residents, rediscovering their talents, their passion, and that is something they have control over. So that's great. Now, can you explain why having a say is valuable for residents? Let's say moving forward, how can we continue to embrace this sort of input from the residents?
One of the best conversations I had in this space that really made me understand this need for people to still have their voice. One of my mentors, Dr. Thomas, started this idea of a shouting. And it seemed silly, and why would you bring all these people to get together and just shout? But they loved it. And so if you think about when people are moving into senior living, granted, there are some instances of voluntary where people know at 65, 70, 75, that's where I'm going. I'm loading my stuff up, they have the van and they move in. most of the time it's not that easy. And how I had this explanation is, if you think about you as an adult child, if you're taking your parents to the doctor usually is speaking to you about a condition as if the mom or dad is not there. So I'm going to talk to you rather than talking directly to you, and we answer questions. If you fast forward and you look at when people move into senior living, that conversation oftentimes is between the adult child and the sales leader and the influencer, and the resident is just sitting back. I saw this with my mother-in-law. We did the same thing. And it wasn't until I heard that in this funnel into senior living and how you get there, most of the time their voice is not heard. And if you do not find ways to let that voice be heard when they first move into senior living, that trend continues, which I think is often the times of, what do you want to do today? What would you rather do? I don't know. It's whatever you want to do, whatever she wants to do, that's fine with me. And so making sure that in this process, there is direct communication to that future resident to say, what do you want to do here? But continuing that in it. One of the things that I used to think was okay was once a month, we'll bring the residents together and we have a resident council meeting, right? Once a month for an hour, that their voice, you have to create operational moments where the voice is continuously heard, even if we don't know how to respond or it's a hard conversation. Because some of them are going to be hard. Life is happening.
Yeah. Very tough conversation with your loved one. Very tough conversation with the caregiver. Let's face it, it's a tough journey, transition. It doesn't have to be, but the reality is it's very tough, and even more so now. So I think it just takes a special heart, whether it comes from the family member or the caregiver, to really make the time to understand the person's thinking, why they are or why they're hesitant. Sure, for obvious reasons that we know of, but still, it takes a serving heart, an opening ear to really spend the time and understand the individuals. And I think sometimes perhaps they're silent is because society has treated them, shut them off, so to speak. It's very wrong. And they're just going along with that stereotype. And that's a different topic,
Right.
Altogether a different topic. But I think it's so easy for them to be silent because maybe underneath it all, they don't feel that they have a reason. Why get used to this setting? I'm leaving a lot behind. Again, you don't have to. It could be a new beginning. It could be making new friends, learning a new skill. It takes a special setting, a group of people to open that up. I've gone through with my mom and dad, and it's just an all-around tough journey. And I highly recommend for loved ones to have those conversations way before your parents are in their 80s. I'm in my mid-50s, and I recommend that we can bottle some of these conversations and give it to the children who are in their 30s and 40s. I think that will help them a lot and help their parents to know that they have choices. Thank you for sharing that. So now, historically, senior living often approach activities and engagement with more is better type of mentality. How has the pandemic shifted this? And do you think this is a positive or a negative thing?
I love that question, Han. Yes, I had this epiphany very early on in the pandemic because what we were able to provide virtually and through an in-house TV channel was maybe 10 to 20% of what we were previously offering in person and having this crazy robust calendar. And along with that, we were also doing some consistent check-in calls with the residents of where I was still working at the time. And we discovered that they're like, oh my gosh, we have more than enough going on. You guys are doing more than enough. And after 3, 4, 5, 6 times of hearing that, it made me say, what? I was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? That more is better. Where did this concept even come from? And it made me realize, are we really truly being thoughtful about, or intentional is a better word, about what we provide on that program or on that calendar of offerings? What is the intention behind it? What is the purpose behind it? Are we discovering that when we learn about our residents and who they are as individuals, are we also learning what they still aspire to do? What still matters most to them when they rise each day? What do I want to do today? And are we providing that? Does that mean we need to provide 500 things? I don't think so. And I think this is an opportunity for more independently led programs or resident led programs that doesn't necessarily need to be scheduled out. It also opens up the door for a lot more spontaneous happenings. I say all the time when I'm working with communities, when you go home tonight after work, do you have things scheduled out at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m.? And people will look at me like, no. I'm like, then why do we feel we need to schedule out every single minute of the day? Sarah and I had the good fortune to be part of a panel back in the spring, and we had a resident attend. And he shared with us in the comments, I don't like living in a community that feels the need, these are his words, to spoon feed me entertainment all day long. And that just hit me right here. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have we done? And so I think there is a significant opportunity to really move forward and be intentional. And if we're going to keep talking about senior living is a place that is in alignment with longevity, we need to have things that we're offering that are evidence-based to support longevity. And I think we could start to weed out some of the low attended programs. We can let residents go. We just give them the tools, the resources, the space. Go do programs you want to do. And let's be really thoughtful about what we promote and put out there from a programming standpoint.
Very true. So instead of bombarding them with too many choices, maybe it's not even relevant or of interest to them, perhaps be more thoughtful, intentional, and find a good fit. And it may take some time, trial and error, and let them be the driver of what the program entail, as opposed to just providing them just countless of activities. So it's a very good point. Now, what other trends or opportunities are we seeing in senior living and the aging industries regarding tools and solutions to support longevity?
Technology obviously comes into play. I think it has also been eye-opening to see how many people are open to technology. Blanket statements were not unusual. Oh, the residents here, they just don't like technology. Maybe the louder, boisterous ones are not keen on it, but what about all those people you aren't talking to every day? And we've seen adoption rise quite high. And the other part, I think, is the opportunities of the outside world who are now wanting to support people in senior living. Before, there was no real awareness to it. And right, wrong, or indifferent, those pictures of or stories of people sitting behind glass windows tug at people's heartstrings. And so the intergenerational and millennial and those generations are like, oh, they're just busy doing games. They're creating solutions for engagement and looking at this whole new interaction of older and younger. And I think it's beautiful. So that's where I see it. And of course, there's going to be so many more when we look at telehealth and isolation and offerings, especially for accessibility is huge, right? You can't hand people devices and then voila, you have engagement.
Very true. So awareness of older adults and communal living is greater than ever. I think that right now we have a great platform in front of us to show how the industry is willing and able to innovate and respond in a manner that puts the residents and families as a main focus. So how can we act upon this message to make sure that it is heard?
I think there's a lot of steps to answer that question. I think, and Sarah just mentioned this, I think the storytelling, I think so much of senior living does not get shared to the greater public. The pandemic has put a spotlight on our industry for, unfortunately, some negative reasons or sad reasons. And just like Sarah and I have shared today, we've had a lot of positives rise to the surface as well. And I think it's the piece that has bothered us even pre-pandemic, that why don't more people understand that senior living or communal living for aging adults can be a really positive environment, and a lot of incredible stories come out of it. You learn about people's personal histories, their professional lives, their personal lives, the things that they have accomplished or overcome, and the bonds between staff and residents, and how staff even get to know the families intimately, because the families come in all the time and you're getting to know them. And so when there are tough times, you support one another and you may need to grieve together. And I think there's all these elements of our world that just never get highlighted. And it's like when you get a set of reviews, you could have 50 awesome reviews. It's only going to be that one you recall. Same in our industry. It's been easy to always allow the catastrophic or negative or sad stories to rise to the surface. And why are we not touting the amazing experiences and positive events that come out of this type of setting? And Sarah and I, and many of our peers, and Han, I'm sure you do too, we have piles of these incredible stories. Oh. Sarah and I could sit around for 3 days and tell resident stories with each other and never run dry of it. And they would be all amazing stories. And some might evoke emotions, but they're all amazing stories. And I think it's that piece of our world that is missing. And I think if we could tout that, and how right now specifically, senior living is actually a really safe place for a vulnerable or aging person. And in addition to that, look at all of this additional positivity that could surround that.
I wholeheartedly believe that. Everything that you were saying, and then some. The folks who are in the senior living, it's not a job, it's a passion, it's a serving heart. That's the bottom line. We're in a caring business, right? Despite what you hear. Every single person in this industry, they have a serving heart, period. And let's say when you come in, your loved one come into a community, although the title is caregiver, but I don't see them as caregivers. I see them as an extended family that I have to entrust, or I want to entrust for caring for my loved ones. I couldn't agree with you more.
As we were talking, and Kelly, we had these aha moments. And what I took away from that is, as we need to tell their story, we need to have them tell their story. Tell their story so peers hear that. And I think the power in that is, how do you unite whatever level of care it is, right? Whatever lobbying party there is or organization that is supporting the different levels of care, uniting those together and letting residents have this message, I think would be extremely more powerful than throwing marketing dollars and more at a message that looks the exact same for every organization or community. I know the most profound moments I have in this space are when residents talk to me face to face and they tell me about how to be a good mother, how to be a good wife, the times that you're going to remember the most in life. You need to go home and be with your kids. Stop taking care of us. I don't know how many times I've heard that. Just the wisdom and being able to see that as strength and power and not frailty or older age through that spoken word.
Wow. I'm so glad that we connected. I echo that. And I think that's one of the driving force behind the Boomer Living is to bring stories and bring a journey like yours, bring it to light. Because I got to tell you, every single one, I keep saying this, I'm going to say it again, every single one of the folks who are in this industry, they all have a serving heart. They're very compassionate, empathetic, and their goal is to how to better serve this upcoming baby boomers and their parents. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet you on social media and to have this opportunity to talk to you and learn about your work. Now, do you have anything else that you would like to share?
So much gratitude for the people who are now going into month 8. It's been a hard year. And I don't think that we understand just the stress and the toll that it's taken on these people, but they keep showing up to work every day. And I'm so proud to be a part of this industry.
I am too. Thank you. Thank you so much. How about you? Do you have anything else to add, Kelly?
I would just like to add that I just think this whole experience for people everywhere has only highlighted how valuable and how critical relationships are, and that we need to cherish those and embrace the different ways we can to maintain them. And whether that's in senior living or in our own lives, with our families, with our friends. And that is one of the biggest ahas that I've had out of all of this. And I want to make sure moving forward that we are able to protect and honor those for the people who do reside in senior living settings.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. I love learning. I love listening. And mostly, I just think what you guys are doing is awesome. And what better things to do right now
Thank
is
you.
to bring light to your journey and how everyone in this industry is amazing, despite everything you hear. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, you have a great rest of the year.
Yeah, happy
You
holidays.
too.